We have 4 funding options. So it's not just one, there's 4 different options. So we're going to talk about grants, interest-free loans, wage subsidies, and training reimbursements. So 4 options to help you essentially subsidize. And the context of this, I think that's important, is why is our Ontario government, Canadian government, why are they giving out these grants? Well, there's been a acknowledgement that there are some serious risks to our Canadian economy based on competitiveness. And if there isn't strong digital adoption in our economy, we're going to be less efficient as businesses overall in the economy. Our nonprofit friends are going to be providing fewer services, less efficiently. So there's this sort of overwhelming or overarching kind of recognition from a government perspective. We need to help businesses modernize, and we're willing to take your tax dollars and feed them back into certain businesses to help them modernize better. So why don't you kick us off and talk about grants, Jermaine?
For sure. There's hundreds of grants that are out there right now, different organizations. We're touching on just a couple of them. And we specifically chose these because they all align with some form of digital adoption, modernization, and exist in both realms of for-profit organizations and for nonprofit organizations. So there's funding for everyone. Grants that exist, there are a couple of well-known organizations like the Trillium Foundation that does tons of grants there. Specifically, you can get grants around $150K towards technology upgrades within your environment.
Yeah, that's the Resilient Communities Fund.
That's right. The Resilient Communities Fund, which again, for nonprofits, and that's only part of the fund. Then you look at, you've got internships for the organizations that do internships in that system. Techify ourselves, we do a Women in Tech internship. We do within that internship, now you can get grants between $5,000 to $7,000 per trainee for a kind of 12 to 16 week kind of internship or co-op, right? So there's grants, and that's per person. So you can have up to two trainees come in, and then you get the grant money around that. Hiring new graduates straight out of university. You want to invest in their training, development, and getting them up to speed. You can get up to about anywhere between 50 to 75% of their initial salary through the government covered as one of those subsidies. Training grants for your current organization. Then you've got the Canadian Digital Adoption Program that goes anywhere between $2,400 to about $15K for you to look at your organization and do any and everything. You want to launch a new marketing platform and a strategy and build that out. You can pay the consultant and pay half of that up to $15K that the government will cover. So there's lots of grants that sit out there. More importantly, though, what we want to talk a little bit more about is one that's kind of much larger and will give you an opportunity within your organization to go through and apply for something that'll create phenomenal change. Right? I'll pause there in case you want to add anything, Brendan.
So here's what I want to add. This is a program that we are currently using, and we're going through the application processes ourselves. And part of the sort of what gave us the idea to do this webinar is we know, like ourselves, everybody's looking for ways to do more with technology, but we're all struggling. Higher interest rates, higher cost of living, everybody wants to get paid more, higher business costs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So how do we, in this economy, how do we invest more in technology? And this is a grant that Jermaine's going to talk about here that is our favorite one because it's a sizable amount of money. And it's something that can have big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to talk a little bit about the OCI is the Ontario Centre of Innovation. They fund 2 tracks or programs related to digital modernization. Part 1 is getting that digital modernization and adoption plan. And what this portion of the grant provides to you as the company owner and or the company that's looking to make that change is you can get up to $15,000 covered by the OCI which would be about 50% of the overall cost. So as an example, it's a one-to-one match. Your organization would put $1, they put $1, you have two, and then you can pay the consultant to work with your organization and develop that DMAP plan and get that DMAP going. Once that is done, that DMAP allows you to then get into part 2 of the program, which will cover anywhere between $1,000 to 150,000, of which again it's a one-to-one match. So as an example, your ERP in your organization will cost you $270,000 to do. You can get half of that covered by the government in order to support that transition. And then your company can contribute the remainder in kind, etc., towards paying.
Yeah, staff costs, like you're going to implement an ERP in the CFO's time, the staff time, the training time, the et cetera, like you're paying for all that. So that's part of your contribution. So up to $165,000. Jermaine, there was just a question that popped in. Is this for for-profits only, or is this one?
This one's open to everyone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for-profit or nonprofit, whichever way you like your profits, this one is open to you.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the reasons we wanted to focus in on this one specifically is because it does offer you quite a bit, right? And you can get that and see your way forward. So you're only using about half.
Yeah, and the other bit with that's consistent with that, it's a considerable amount of money, up to $165,000. And the reason we want to go after bigger grants at any of our organizations, because the time that it takes to go through sort of the hurdles and the funding and stuff like that, it's a significant amount of time, and significant amount of time and effort. So you don't want to do this for $10,000. You want to do this for a bigger chunk.
Yeah, you want to pick that grand thing that's going to have the most impact on your organization, require the most investment, and then work with that. And I updated the timelines after going through and running this process ourselves internally and working with the OCI and the government to start our own program. So in the first month, it's really about working through and understanding what your organization is going to do. Month 2, you're going to get that needs and goal definition. You're going to go ahead and pick a DMAP consultant and work with them in order to produce what is required for that application. Month 3 and 4, you're going to complete the application, get it all verified, validated, etc., over that couple of months, and then submit it for validation. And at that point, you've got to still wait somewhere between 5 to 8 months at that point, because what will happen is it'll go through an internal review, then it'll pass from person to person and go through this other 8-stage process internally at the OCI and the government, of which if they come back to you and they need additional information, etc., it'll extend the timeline. But realistically, this is going to be an 8th-month endeavor before you have cash in hand to do the thing that you'd like to go and do. And at that point, you want to plan this out ahead of time. Right? You want to know today what you're going to do in your next year or your next fiscal year or 8 months down the line, so that you can get this process started.
Yeah, so that's a really good point. If you're interested in this, get on it now. Same person that asked the question said that they just checked the DMAP grant and that said it was for-profit, privately owned only. So
when we work through the OCI, there's different program tracks. The money is available to both nonprofit and profit, but we can work with you to figure out where you need to be and direct you to the one that's appropriately named for a nonprofit.
Yeah, it's showing up as anonymous attendee, so let us know who you are. You can fill out, there's a little thing at the end, and we can help you through this. Like there is an amount of complexity with these, and it's important to have some help from folks that have done it before. So just something to consider with it. Okay, so I want to make sure we keep moving along here. So number 1, our favorite one, because it's grants and it's money that you don't have to pay. Number 2 is keeping it
interest-free loans.
Number 2 is interest-free loans. And so you can there's a federal program that's administered by the BDC, Business Development Canada, Business Development Bank of Canada. And what you can do is you can get an interest-free loan up to $100K. for these same type of initiatives. And usually the way these interest-free loans work is 5-year terms. So if you think about the benefit of getting a good chunk of money now, especially with where interest rates are now, we're into the like our credit lines are in the 7 to 8% range, I think, for a lot of folks. The cost of $100,000 over 5 years that's $35,000 in interest costs, right? And getting that up front and be able to deploy that money, and even mixing it with the other one, you can apply for multiple programs, right? And you can get funding from multiple places. So you do need to have a DMAP or digital modernization adoption program. That's what it stands for, right, Jermaine?
Plan, yeah.
Man, so many.
You're close, so close. We do need that DMAP plan for in order to be able to be eligible to do this as well, because everything starts with having that clear plan and draft of what you're going to do, and then the remaining of the funding, whether it comes from Trillium or it comes from OCI, for profit, non-profit, will be then approved to implement.
Yeah, you do need to understand all the 100 different acronyms that will happen in this process. So yeah, there's some learning and understanding. Okay, number 3, Jermaine, why don't you take us over to wage subsidies?
Yeah, so for wage subsidies, number 3, if you're doing one of the prime examples that we have of that is being able to cover up to about 80% of internal cost for payroll, and or 50% for subcontractor costs. A lot of this is around industrial. This particular program is the Industrial Research Assistance Program, and they give you the whole criteria around what would validate and be counted under that. So if you're in manufacturing, working in industry, and you're working through to develop A, B, or C application, service, model, physical prototype, there's things that are included in there that you can get anywhere up to about 80% of that internal payroll cost for the person that you're employing to do that work. And it's designed to make sure that you get assistant funding for hiring young Canadians, postgraduates. It provides up to about $30,000 per graduate, up to 2 graduates over a kind of a 6 to 12 month period, if they're looking at that for that initial phase. So if you're going to get a developer out of university, as an example, to work with that kind of program within your organization, then you'd be able to have up to about 80% of that covered for those internal payroll costs. So being able to subsidize those wages and get the talent that you need in-house to do what you need is super important, and kind of work under that particular program.
So you see the potential here. You're kind of stacking $165,000 on top of $100,000, potentially $150,000 or $30,000 or stuff like that. You're stacking those different amounts together, and you're starting to get into some significant funding that's going to have an impact on what you're trying to do. Here's a program we've now used for, I think, 4 years, Jermaine?
Yeah, 4 years running. Yeah.
4 years. And we got up to this year close to $100,000 grant. So it's the Canadian Ontario Job Grant. It will fund between 50 and 83% of training. If you're less than, Jermaine, is it 100 employees or 50 employees?
You're less than 100 employees.
Okay, so if you're less than 100 employees, it will fund 83% of a training program. If you're more than 100 employees, it'll fund 50% of training program, and it's up to $10,000 per training funding. When you look at digital modernization, AI, there's a boatload. I was doing a talk about AI this morning, and everybody was talking about how do we train our team on prompts and interacting with AI and this Copilot thing that's coming on and that Microsoft's coming out with, and et cetera, et cetera. This is an opportunity. You can get training funding for implementing and adopting new technology. Like the folks that we're gonna adopt a CRM system, that are gonna adopt an ERP system, or even go into Microsoft 365. Got to teach people how to use SharePoint, how to use Teams, and how to use all these tools, Microsoft Forms, and that sort of stuff. So we've used this over the past 4 years for a combination of different leadership, customer service, sales, and new technology training. So great program. Once you start using it, we now use it on an annual basis, and we know how it works and what we need to provide and that sort of stuff. We got a great trainer, external folks. So again, hey, let's stack another $100,000 on top. So we're getting into, if you combine the different stuff we've talked about today, we're getting kind of close to, or could be even north of $500,000, right? I'm no mathematician, but we're like, you talk about between $250,000 and $500,000 in terms of funding, then that starts to match some of those big dollar figures that we talked about early in our webinar. All right, so thank you once again for joining our webinar. Please contact us if you're interested in some more on this topic. It's a fun topic. It's an interesting topic. It's a way that we can all advance more from a technology digital perspective and use some of that tax money that we've all sent to the government, get some of it back to pay for technology. So Jermaine, thanks for joining.
Thank you for having me, Brendan, and take care, everyone out there.
Have a great day.